Hey everyone, welcome to the long anticipated Battle of the Scheldt week. I'm really excited for this week and to get lots of different people on, talk about different aspects of the campaign in the Scheldt. And this is one of the questions I got asked previously and set up for tonight, but the importance of the campaign and the battle. And we can get into that, in my opinion, a little bit later. But today is going to be an Ask Me Anything about the battle and the campaign, and if you have questions, if you want my opinions on things, comments you want to make, just basically an open discussion to kind of kick it off. So I'm excited to do this, have some questions already loaded up and ready to go from some of my patrons. So excited to get into those. Been doing some last minute kind of digging to kind of remember some of the logistics of all of this, because there's a lot going on, a lot of moving pieces, and part of why this battle is so important. So the first one comes from one of my patrons, from Stephen Page. One second here. And it's a good one. So once Antwerp was open, right, and that's the whole point of this entire campaign, is to clear the Scheldt estuary of German forces so that the shipping can get into the port of Antwerp and supply the Allied push into northern Germany. So looking at this, again, I'm not entirely sure. Again, logistics are always complicated and involve lots of things and lots of people and lots of moving parts. But the best guess as I can tell is it's 21st Army Group. It is the majority. It's the focus. I mean, it's in that sector. Antwerp is there, but also I think parts of the 12th Army Group, U.S. Army Group under Omar Bradley, are getting supplied through Antwerp as well. Just doing some quick digging and just found some photos of U.S. stuff coming through Antwerp. So that kind of goes in part hand in hand with what's coming through South France as a part of Operation Dragoon, right, where they take the Allies take the south coast of France as well. So that comes and supplies the Army Group to the south and all of those forces under it. So as far as I can tell, Antwerp is important primarily for 21st Army Group, but also for 12th Army Group under U.S. command. So it's an interesting part of this, right, is what does it supply? What's it for? And inevitably the rabbit hole, start that off early, leads to the Battle of the Bulge, right? A German objective is to kind of pull another 1940, right, and cut the two Allied forces in half and get to Antwerp. Which they never come even close to doing, not even close at all. But that was the idea: cut off Antwerp, cut off the supplies. So it just led me to that kind of what may or may not have happened. Obviously, Market Garden's part of that thought processes, I'm assuming, in that kind of sort of vein. Obviously, yes, I know Market Garden is different and not part of this, but and shipping had not been cleared for Market Garden, Antwerp yet. But in that same sort of vein, right, any kind of quicker thrusts across into Germany, easier getting across, parts of the Rhine and getting into that North German plain there to attack and get into Germany faster. But as far as I know, it's just those armies in the north, and kind of part of the overall strategy, right, is kind of that broad front advance, but coming over the Rhine in this part is a really, really interesting one. So again, hopefully that kind of clears that up for you. Again, if you have questions, anybody watching now, please fire away. I'm sure they already are. I'm just on a bit of a delay. So I will wait for a bit because there's some other ones, but they're a little bit meatier. So I want to see if there's anything else coming through. So just with that said, I'll say now, tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern time, having Mike Bechtold come on to talk about air power in the Scheldt. One I'm really looking forward to. I know there's always lots of questions revolving around, the air campaign and air support and what that could have been and what that looked like for the fighting in the Scheldt. It's a fascinating part of this and something that I'm really looking to kind of get some answers from. Not like Mike has all the answers, but he has a lot of them. But kind of looking at that, right? Because it's a controversial part of this, right? Some of the air support wasn't given in full like they could have. Big part of that. Some of the controversy over that. Some comments made by Bomber Command. And all that kind of stuff. So I'm really looking forward to, obviously, Mike knows his stuff, and getting him on and getting him talking about air power and kind of seeing what impact that has on the campaign or lack thereof. It's going to be fascinating to look at that and all the different stuff. So really, really excited for that. So yeah, sorry, just keep coming up here. So the Red Ball Express, yeah. So that's the basically convoy system getting supplies to the front line from Normandy. Was canceled in November 44. Yeah, the Americans had to be drawing supplies from Antwerp. It's impossible. So yeah, the 9th and the 1st, I assume, are the ones, and maybe the 3rd at certain points afterwards, right after the Bulge, because they've moved further north. But yeah, I think in broad terms, I think it's the U.S. 12th Army Group is getting supplies through Antwerp. Like I said, finding photos and stuff is really, really interesting. And an interesting way to look at things, right? Things we don't always assume. So there's lots of German attention as well on Antwerp now that I'm thinking about this. Not just with the Bulge, right? Trying to cut off the Allied forces in half and cutting off that outlet for supply, but also it's a target of the V1 and V2 stuff going on. And Scott just came up with that right now, to capturing the V1 and the V2 feed into the campaign in the Scheldt. Not as far as I can tell. Again, I haven't seen the overall plan documents in a while, but I don't think it has a major impact on the Scheldt, right? You have to clear the estuary completely, which had not been done when the city was taken. Before anything can even get into the city. Yes, it's important to kind of hold that position, but nothing. It's not the direction they're coming from, right? They're not coming from Baveland and those islands to the north. That's not where they're coming from. They're coming from further away. So I don't think it's really an impetus of the Scheldt campaign. The impetus was always clear the estuary, clear the mines, as we did a show last year around this time. And I'll link that down below after. But it's getting the mines out, getting the Germans clear, getting the artillery away, so that the convoy ships can come through. That's, to me, seems to be the be all end all. This is being discussed for a long time, high levels. I think even before the V weapons are discovered or used really in any capacity. So before the Normandy landings. Again, I could be wrong, but I think it's part of the whole discussion of what the advance was going to look like, right? You have to clear Antwerp because it's a major port. I mean, there's the whole discussion of, the channel ports that are on, 1st Canadian Army's left flank, but also the ports in like Cherbourg, Brest, and all of those in France, which are just not as big as Antwerp, right? Antwerp is massive. It still is massive. It's a massive port and can take so much more. I mean, just the amount of numbers that is just mind-boggling coming through as opposed to these other smaller places. So no, I don't think it has really anything to do with the V weapons. So they don't really hit that as to begin with, but yeah, and like as Dave Sheldrake says, it's hit more than London. And some of the most famous photos of the war or of the civilians killed in Antwerp, troops as well. For leisure time outside a theater, I believe. Just one hits in the street and kills a bunch of people. They just start hitting Antwerp, the Germans, with these rockets as much as possible, just to kind of try to break morale. I guess they don't aim them at the dock facilities really, or if they did, they don't come anywhere close. It does nothing to hurt the dock facilities in any way, shape, or form, which is a positive for the Allies, right? That these last-ditch attention, or these last-ditch weapons have almost no impact on Antwerp itself, anyway. So this is a really interesting one here. Hold on, let me get my screen shared again. From Dave who's watching today, and I've been thinking about this one a lot. And maybe some people watching have some very strong opinions about Simmons. So does the Scheldt campaign show the potential Simmons could have demonstrated had he commanded the Canadian Army, or 1st Canadian Army, throughout the Northwestern Europe campaign? I don't know. Again, these are all hypotheticals, right? It's a good question, and it's a really interesting way to think about how command works and how personalities work. I mean, this isn't new for those of you who've been following the channel for a while, but I think Couillard is the appropriate choice for 1st Canadian Army. He might not be the best, strategic or even tactical mind, within the Canadian higher ranks. But First Canadian Army Group isn't just about strategic vision. There's not enough Canadian troops to fill an entire army. So there are other nationalities involved, Poles, Brits, Americans at certain points. So all those different personalities, different backgrounds, dealing with Monty, I'm sure he'll come up a bit today, as the overall commander of 21st Army Group. He handled him as well as he could. Criar handling Monty. Of course, Simmons was, one of Monty's proteges. Whole book. I did a review, and I'll do an online review of this book. I've just been putting it off for a little bit about Monty and his influence on the Canadian Army at the end of the Second World War and into the early Cold War. About that and Simmons and Criar. I mean, both are discussed at length in that book. And he and the author, John English, Canadian historian, just says that, this is all Monty's army. This has everything to do with Monty, which I don't believe really fully. And I did an academic review that's behind a paywall, unfortunately. But it's interesting. I don't know. I don't think he could have handled it the way Criar could have handled it. I don't think he would have had the best interests at all times of the Canadian troops, putting that kind of in a broad sense. And the reason why I say that, is the discussion right about that whole Dieppe episode at the beginning of September, where Criar is supposed to be at a meeting of the army commanders with Monty about continuing the advance, getting assignments, that kind of thing, and he refuses to go because he wants to be at the ceremonies at Dieppe. I don't see Simmons doing that in any in practical terms, or even in mindset. I don't see him putting Canada first in that regard. I see him putting Monty's vision first. But again, this is all just speculation. I don't know. I don't know if Simmons could have handled it all, to be completely honest. And Sheldrick brings up an excellent question. Again, kind of piggybacking off his own. I do. I think he was better suited to Corps Command. I do. He had his faults, but he did some things well. I think he was better suited at that level. Simmons is very much like Monty in that control the battle space, control the battle plan, have almost a sort of rigid, again, this can cause some debate, structure to the battle. He did that a lot. And some of the things, yes, it could have been done like that moving forward. I'm thinking particularly of, Operation Veritable, clearing the bank of the Rhine, getting over the Rhine, plunder, and afterwards. It's just that needed some flexibility. And Simmons wasn't the best at that. In terms of overall personalities, right? That can't be discussed, that can't be dismissed, when you're talking about army level command. So I think, he's better suited to the Corps level command. I mean, and yes, he was held in high regard. Ramsey, who is the admiral with the plan for all of this, of clearing the Scheldt, Plan D-Day, and all of that. So, he's held in high regard by some, not so much. Some of the high command don't really favor Simmons in a lot of ways. You see that at the end of the war. Simmons is expecting high command. He doesn't get it. Being chief of the general staff, doesn't get it until much later. Criar, gets folks in there. His kind of, protege is not the right word, but his choice. There's this whole personality mesh. I see the three of Criar, Simmons, and Monty, and Simmons and Monty on one side and Criar on the other. I think Criar is doing the best for Canada because he had to at this point. I get, working as part of a team, but also you have to keep Canadian interests in mind. It's also the first army, not the Canadian army, broadly speaking, but an army level organization that's head by a Canadian, right? Curry only reaches Corps Command in the First World War. So there's that element too, right? And you have to keep Canadian interests in mind. And there's a political part of this. Canada gets enough support to have an army at this point. So Simmons, I think, handles the Scheldt well. I mean, there's a few hiccups here and there, as there always are, and a few mistakes, as always happens. But I think any commander would have made some similar mistakes in the Scheldt, and how some of the things were done. And again, lots of moving parts and different commands here. Combined Arms suffers a little bit. And the Scheldt, and I don't know, it doesn't think it would have mattered, but I think moving past the Scheldt and that push into Germany, which was supposed to happen much sooner, but of course the Battle of the Bulge pushes everything back. I don't think Simmons was the best choice. Yeah, and that's well said. I think Brits like Simmons, Canadians not so much. Yeah, I mean there are some Canadians like Simmons, like Monty, plenty. I think they're great soldiers. Not disparaging him. He makes mistakes, does some kind of passing the blame, which I'm never a fan of at any level. But it's it's interesting because right, because Simmons is of British birth, like so many Canadian generals and leaders are. So he kind of carried that air, I guess, is the best way to say of him. Kind of cocky, but it's a confidence, I guess. I don't know. It depends on who you're reading and how you're reading it. Every author presents these things differently, and depending on who they're writing about and how they're going about it. I mean, this stuff doesn't come through too much in primary documents, especially ones I've looked at, right? I've gone through Carrera's papers a lot, not a good chunk of them, and his relationships with people and things like that. And everything is painted differently depending on the sources you're using. Yeah, so again, anybody watching, fire away with some questions. Yeah, well, yeah, obviously, I think it does. Canadians attacked the Scheldt at less than 1 odds. Yeah, it has a major impact on how the battle is fought. Supplies are limited. Support is limited. I mean, there's airstrikes to, say, flood Walcheren Island, which turns out to not be the best decision. But it was kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't type of situation there. It has a massive impact on how this is done, and also kind of a pressure to get it done. That can lead to questions of market garden and why the approaches weren't cleared earlier. Another one shrouded in mystery seemingly forever, but it has an impact. Again, the movie came out last year, I think now around this year. I can't remember. Movie on the Battle of the Scheldt, right? The Forgotten Battle, which it is clearly not. But they show, the famed or infamous attack across the Walcheren Causeway at the end of October, early November. And just, I think there's some movie mistakes in there, but also they show kind of what's lacking, right? The lack of supply, lack of ability to maneuver, lack of all of that stuff. It's a fascinating way to think about it in that sense. It has a massive issue in terms of terrain. We can't get away from that, right? It's the photos of this campaign are just so striking to see. It looks like these little islands in the middle of the ocean, right? Houses, trees, right? You can only travel over the water or, exposed on the top of a dike. Becomes almost an amphibious campaign in that sense. The alligator gets a lot of usage, right? Kind of an armored landing craft that can also go on land. There's one included in the trailer there. People really like those. They are pretty cool. So it's something that also imperils the campaign, takes on this almost, pass and jail kind of morass of mud and cold and difficulty, straight up difficulty. The unit diaries are just full of constant, notes of this, the difficulty in the water and having to advance consistently under fire because of these things, and limited access of advances is problematic, especially at the bigger islands as they push their way. I guess I got to pull up a map, but you can see it, right? Moving along the main coast, the south side of the Scheldt, and moving up and over to clear those islands is where they are. Causes a good number of issues, as well as a lack of aerial resources. And I don't want to talk too much about that tonight because I want Mike to cover those. But big discussion over the use of airborne troops in the Scheldt, and that's called off. I don't know. I think that would have made a difference. Maybe they all would have just been dropped into a flooded plain, or the flooded islands, Walcheren especially. I don't know. It's just it's one of those what ifs again, right? It's hard to say what would have gone what way if certain things were done differently. again, we can just speculate and guess, but that's certainly an interesting one. I mean, I think about the airborne part a lot, and how that's changed fairly last minute. But yeah, and this has been covered as well. I had Mark Zuehlke on last year, talked about that as well. So it's really interesting. That's a really interesting question. So Eisenhower, overall commander of SHAFE, right? The Allied Expeditionary Force. Sorry, excuse me. Still getting over that cold, I guess, a little bit. I haven't talked this much in a while. It seems that way. It seems that way that Eisenhower has to get Monty to support this better. Kind of forcing him to, hey, you had your shot. Right? Talking about Market Garden. Didn't work. Sorry. So that question I could do in a second. Yeah, because he's like, I don't know. That's why I see it, right? He's like, we let you try your plan. It didn't work. Support what we need to do now. We have to go back to the broad front strategy, not a pinprick. Someone will probably be upset that I call Market Garden a pinprick, but in the grand scheme of things, I think it was. It's something that I see in the whole campaign, right? Telling them basically, you can't do what you want. You got to do this. We need this, and it's not going to continue on. Can't get into Germany without it, right? And you see that the difficulties that are going to be done, at variable in those conditions, right? Same sort of thing here, not as flooded, but wet, cold, muddy. I mean, the amount of supplies they bring up is amazing in terms of numbers and variety, and that's not possible without Antwerp, right? So you need that, and I think it's the right call. I don't know. I think that's because that's how the way it goes, right? That's how the actuality happens. I think that's the right call, and getting that right support at the right time is something, right, you can discuss until the cows come home, as they say, because it's a what if. It's an interesting what if, but yeah, eventually Ike has to get Monty to put more resources into it. Yeah, very small movie. Yeah, that movie had an interesting timelines applied. I mean, that one guy's wandering about the flooded islands for, I think, 6 weeks or something like that from the beginning. Yeah, from Market Garden up until basically Walcheren Causeway. He's just wandering around, not malnutritioned at all, or he's clean shaven, which I thought was interesting. Wandering around these flooded islands, and somehow it's time to shave. But anyway, yeah, that's neither here nor there. So Scott's got an interesting question. Was there any discussion about tagging some of those islands by the sea? No, in that sense. Like coming from somewhere else, you mean like from Britain or something? No, they obviously cross from the south shore of the Scheldt and a little bit further away, moving up, right? And they go backwards as well with switchback to kind of clear the Breskins pocket, which is another part of this campaign, and an important part. But no, because all the resources are there, right? They're not in Britain anymore. They want to use what they have there to clear this out, right? So it'd be time consuming and difficult. And everything is there. There's always a shortage of landing craft, even at this point. Because there's plans for the Pacific, right? To get those operations moving, striking a Burma, that kind of thing. Sorry. So no, as far as I know, there's no major plan to hit from further away. I mean, there are seaborne landings, but they come from mainland Europe, which is right there. Right? It's wide in terms of rivers, but it's still right there. So as far as I don't know, there's no major plans to kind of have like a seaborne landing in a larger sense, but just using the units that are already present on the mainland. Yeah, I mean, this is how I've always taken it. That Monty will just that Ike will assume Monty will just come around. Hey, Angela, thanks for coming and joining us. I appreciate it. He'll just come around to it, that he'll figure it out. He'll understand the importance of this until he doesn't, right? He just says, hey, take it now. It has to be done. That's how I've always assumed it to be. I could be wrong. I don't know I've never looked at Eisenhower's papers beyond a few here pieces in there, most of it related to Normandy. So I don't know too much in terms of like giving any more insight to Ike's, sort of thought processes here. But looking at things like how Monty thinks in his communications with others and seeing how he communicates with his subordinates, that's my assumption. That's kind of how I've always assumed that this is how Ike is thinking about it. But again, and I think it's right, still focusing on the Nijmegen salient, which becomes a huge focus of the 1st Canadian Army. They're there for months. And those, again, terrible conditions. I can't kind of reiterate that enough, I don't think, of how terrible the conditions truly are in Western Europe, in this part of it anyway. In 1944, in late 1944 into early 45, the conditions are awful. It's one of the coldest winters I think they had in decades, wet as well. It's awful. And this plays into it too. It slows everything down. The Germans take advantage of this by flooding everything all the way, from the islands that are part of the estuary all the way through down the Wall River and the Rhine, and causing all that flooding and slowing everything down. That's another one. I just think Nijmegen salient, because I was doing some work on this today for something else. And it's just, that's all I see. That's all that comes up is cold, wet, muddy, slow. We're kind of got okay accommodations, but everything's wet. I saw that multiple times. So yeah, it seems like that's what he's focusing on. It's really, really cool. So yeah, any more questions? Everyone just keep firing away. Oh, thanks, James. Yeah, it's an interesting campaign. I mean, it's not unknown or forgotten. I know those are taglines used to grab attention on books and movies and videos and everything like that. Obviously, people know about it. People were involved. But it's one that doesn't get the same amount of attention. And that was another question I asked. But I was going to use that until a little bit later. So keep questions coming. But sorry, I didn't mean to close that so fast. It is. It's a really interesting one that I think doesn't get much attention. Part to me that I think is underappreciated, if that's the right word, is kind of the international element of this. Poles, Brits, Canadians working together, fighting together in close proximity under Canadian commander, who's under a British commander, who's under an American commander. I mean, it's got so many layers here. I think it's fascinating. Obviously, the Canadian part is of interest to me. But again, that left flank, that long left flank, that is the 1st Canadian Army after the breakout from the Seine and up right channel ports, moving, hugging the coast. This is why it's 1st Canadian Army. It's just fascinating in that respect, right? I think we tend to have kind of this popular mind's eye of events, Normandy, and then the Bulge, and then the war's just kind of over after that. This is a chunk that gets missed. I mean, obviously, it's important in places like Canada, the Netherlands. It's hugely important. It's still discussed there at length. I mean, that's some of the people we have coming on are from the Netherlands. We've got Robert Katzberg coming on the 26th, early for me, 8 a.m. Eastern. I'll get more details about that soon. But he's been on that. He lives in that area. And we're going to be talking about that. And part of the mainland, I think Preston's Pocket is where he's out of, where he lives and works. So it's obviously important there, enough to make a movie about. From a Dutch production, right? It was a massive production for the Netherlands, one of their biggest. So it's obviously an important one. And again, I keep putting it off that big question, but yeah, it's a fascinating campaign. Yeah, the Allies and Duke forces together, everybody pretty much is involved in this one, and it's a really, 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 really interesting part of that, which I think gets lost in the shuffle a lot, because different nationalities of historians focus usually on their own. Sometimes the Commonwealth gets a look over together. Other parts get left out, like the Poles and stuff like that, which we try to remedy and things of that nature. But it's an unfortunate part of it sometimes, and there's a lot to look at here, right? I mean, I don't know how many Scheldt shows, right? You can just do on every tiny little piece here. I still have people coming to me with ideas now while the week has started. So yeah, it's a really interesting one to look at, and there's so much going on here that I think is not very well known. even in Canada, U.S., Britain, everywhere. I think it just kind of gets lost. Particularly, I don't know. Obviously, I know it's not maybe this is just a thought that nobody asked about, but sorry, one second. It's around the same time. Obviously, it's a longer campaign as LLMA, right? So, yes, LLMA's earlier, but people tend to hyper-focus and things like that get lost unless there's something big happening. Like the movie last year led to lots of discussions on the Scheldt, which was great. Haven't seen that this year, right? It's just it's missing. It's just not there. So it's unfortunate, and I wish it was discussed more and looked at more. And I mean, in certain units, it's usually important, right? The Black Watch, right? The Black Friday, it's the worst day of the war is during the Scheldt. So it's really, really unfortunate. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. So Canadians really talk about the final battle for Walcheren. True. Well, it's mostly focus almost exclusively on that part of the battle. Yes. There's lots to look at, lots of different parts. And you've got commandos as well. I don't know why that's not more popular. People love commandos. With the landings at Walcheren on the west side of the island. I had Stephen Fisher on talking about this last year. And the landings at West Capel, those big guns. It's got all those elements. It's got, kind of that DF element to a commando, dashing commandos, big German guns, and success at some parts. Sorry. Obviously, the DF is not a success, but the commando part is sort of one of them anyway. So yeah, I don't know why it's not more popular, to be honest. You think someone would jump on that element and run it through. I don't know, maybe the bulge gets all the attention. People love it. Oh, hey, Pete, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. Any idea how the Forgotten Battle was received by audiences in the Netherlands? That's a really good question. Did it make such much of a splash? Good one. I like that. Thanks. Great opinion. I don't know. I did a little bit of digging on it in terms of, who was talking about it, right? Just to see who's talking about it, what perceptions people have of things, all that stuff. And I wasn't able to find much in terms of that, unfortunately, other than, the usual Twitter historian discussions about these kinds of things that happen frequently about all kinds of stuff. And I follow some people from the Netherlands, and again, I can ask Robert this when he comes on Wednesday. Get his quick opinion on that, because I had a chat with him a while back. I said, I'm sure someone's going to ask about the movie. And he didn't seem like it was like bad, but I don't know if it had a big impact. I don't know, because also, right, and sorry, that just made me think of this bit of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Rabbit hole. What we focus on too is Canadians in the Netherlands, right? We don't talk much about this part, right? We talk about all the things that happened in 45 in the Netherlands, not this part so much, right? It's all liberation stories and tulips and things like that. We don't really talk about this part so much, which I don't know. I'm not sure, because again, is it a victory? We talk about this at length. Victories, are they victims of their own success? Talking about that with Stephen. Forget anyway with Operation Varsity, right? Nobody talks about Varsity. It's really interesting that the ones that do well don't get so much attention, whereas the bulge is a defeat, right? In terms of the early advances of the Germans, but it's it's overcoming and all this stuff. Whereas the Scheldt doesn't really have that. Yeah, I mean maybe. I don't know, because it's interesting to think about these things, and it's the same, I think, with the movie coming up. Well, I think it's released in certain parts of the world, but All Quiet on the Western Front, right, is a Netflix movie, just like The Forgotten Battle was, right? And it's had some releases in theaters and some early releases, and some people have seen it already, and some haven't. I know they did that a little bit with the Forgotten Battle, but I don't know if it's an interesting way to think about it, right? COVID restrictions, or is that a reflection of the changing way movies get released, right? Particularly when they're bought by Netflix, right? Maybe by the production companies, and Netflix just, de facto becomes a distributor and kind of the digital way. It's interesting. I don't know. And then again, we don't know with COVID, right? We're not going to know the implications of COVID for a long time for these things. But I think it does play a role in this thing. I mean, lots of people were excited about this one online. It got a lot of attention, lots of people talking about it. So it may have well been played into it. Yeah, I don't know. I know Richard is from the Netherlands here. Maybe he can tell us of how it was kind of received. I don't know if there was kind of a general sense of it, right? Is it well received? Did people think it sucked? Nobody heard of it, whatever. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to say earlier. Sorry, excuse me. About general public, Normandy, Liberation of Paris, Market Garden, Bulge, and then Moon's over. Yeah, no, the Rhine's not involved, or they, come from the east side, right, with the Soviet Union. Yeah, I mean, that's I think part of this, right? It doesn't fit well into a story. It doesn't fit the the tropes that have been set up over the last 70 years. The movies obviously play a huge part in this. It's fascinating, right? Because there's this Patton and movies about the Bulge and all of that plays into this, right? You can't deny that has a role on what people think about and how they go thinking about these things. I see it all the time. People deny it, but like people come with their history perceptions from movies and everything. And I think that's part of this, right? If it doesn't get that attention in a movie, even decades previously, it just doesn't seem to get on the radar quite the same, which is unfortunate because I definitely think the Scheldt deserves far more attention for all kinds of reasons. I mean, the lessons learned alone are still have impact and can still have an influence on doctrine, depending on what we think or where we think the battles of the future will take place. And lots to learn about that as well. Yeah, and it's still up. I don't think they'll take it down because they own it, right? They should have seen it by now. I think so. It's interesting. I thought it would got more attention. I thought that what's his name, Tom Felton, would have Harry Potter fame would have got more people to watch. To be honest, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to kind of track these things. Yeah, the Cinderella Army, the concept, right, of undersupplied and given the dirty jobs, difficult jobs, channel ports, moving up. Well, it starts with Normandy-ish, moving up channel ports, difficulty in some of those, under-resourced, moving up through the Scheldt. And then the Nijmegen salient, right, which again, like I already mentioned, is awful. It's not good. I mean, this is what the books have been titled, right? The Cinderella Army. I mean, there's always discussions of Allied superiority of equipment and numbers and supply. And in some cases, that's not true, right? And this is particularly a good case, right? The Scheldt especially. It's just not the case. A lot of that has to do with where the supplies are coming into the continent, right? Still coming from Normandy at this point before Antwerp is cleared. But still more resources, say, based on a Britain could have been given, and they weren't. So any more questions, keep them coming. Sorry, I'm just reading again. Chatting to an academic historian about the public understanding of the Second World War, especially how narrowed, and it is, and obviously, it's massive. I mean, some academics deny that it has an impact. I don't know how. I do. I think it has a major influence, and I think that is changing in a lot of ways now. Video games seem to have a major impact. People again deny that. I don't know how, what the popularity of these things, the number of them, and the amount seemingly coming out every year is more and more and more. People are making their own. There's independent video games studios now, or people crowdsource games. It's fascinating. And some of it involves the Scheldt, which I think is good. It's been involved in some of them, and some of the lesser known campaigns have been involved in some of these games. because I did, I occasionally poke around, see what's going on, things like YouTube and who's doing what and what's got popularity and what are people talking about, to get ideas for videos, but also kind of interact and learn some stuff, and that's part of it. So I think it's hugely influential. Hollywood has obviously had a major impact. See it all the time, whether people realize it or not. Perfect example is Saving Private Ryan, and everyone thinks that's what D-Way was. Someone literally said the famous footage of the Canadians like to hit Chino Beach is fake because it doesn't have bullets and you can't see bullets. And I see bullets and explosions. And I go, not everything is Saving Private Ryan. So anyway, I think that's just the way that this creeps in, and the way people assume things are done. And it's just we're more soft for it. So, and again, it's just how it narrows focus, like James talked about there. It's a narrow focus, unfortunately. Yeah, so that's a good one. Yeah, and sorry, going on Richard here about the movie again. Yeah, Eastern Scheldt. Yeah, oops, sorry, I did it myself. Yeah, Eastern Scheldt. Yeah, I mean, it's not really. The title is unfortunate, I think, for the movie. Forgotten Battle is just not a good title, for all kinds of reasons. It's just called the Forgotten Battle. It doesn't Scheldt nothing. I mean, there's a joke, right, that they forgot the Scheldt in the movie. It's an interesting part of it, and not how I would have done it, but nobody asked me. So, yeah. So sorry, one more second. Yeah, I mean that's it, right? Is this superiority can't? Sorry, my computer's camera's having focus troubles. Oh yes. Why aren't you focusing? Well, there we go. Yeah, it can't have anywhere an impact because of that environmental conditions, distances. That's a long way to go. Yeah, that's obviously like part of this, right? And reinforcements are becoming an issue. I mean, they're already an issue in Normandy for the Canadian Army, generally speaking, because of the whole domestic thing around conscription. And the Scheldt just cements that. And getting more people in is extremely difficult. And they're operating. Yeah, it was called. Sorry, I keep getting distracted. Too many good points being made at once. Yeah, I mean that to me that's the whole thing, right? Yeah, there's some held back. Bomber Command could have been more involved in certain aspects or less dragging of their feet. If you've looked into that, you can see how much they actually drag their feet on this. And Simmons is pushing to get things done, like the breaking of the dikes on Walcheren Island. Takes way longer than it should have. Things like that. Yes, distance, everything like that. It's not some sort of thing against Canadians, but also then there's the issues of bombing. Yeah. Yeah, and it is called. Yeah, I forgot about the Battle of the Scheldt in Dutch. That they know what the Scheldt is. Nobody else knows what the Scheldt is. So I don't know. I don't like when you put forgotten in things because it just kind of sets a tone that I don't like. Because people forgotten and it's we don't know about this, blah blah blah. I'm just not a big fan of that. But that's just me. Yeah. I know, right, Pete? If we can only get movie directors and producers to actually listen to historians or veterans, they are to advise them. Yeah, I mean, that happens all the time. I hear that from people who've worked on movies, being like, we told them, but they didn't listen. They did whatever they wanted, or they just got our broad ideas and then apparently never looked at them or didn't ask us again once everything got going, which is unfortunate. There's only so much we can do, right? That's why one of the reasons for this channel is have a historian, aka me, even though I do everything, in at the beginning, right? I think that's how it should be done. A historian should be involved from the beginning. A historian should know these things and how these things are done in the process. I mean, I do it all because I'm the only one who can do all this, and I can't afford to hire anybody. But it's just, I think it's a good way of how this should go forward, right? Is have historians involved. Obviously, I'm biased because I am one. But I think it would just make a better product in the long run. Someone made, a good point. It's just as much work to get it right as it is to get it wrong. So why not get it right? But yeah, that's my thoughts on that one. So Yeah, and another point here is that, well, uh, yeah, I'm not sorry, I'm not struggling overall. Yes, because I'm thinking about the causeway. That's kind of running in my head because I had a question. Oh, actually, yeah, I didn't get to that. Talking about the movie again and sort of showing how the assault across the causeway is carried out. The only thing is that there's less artillery in the movie than there was in reality. But again, it might not have been the worst thing because showing that scarcity. I think they only had one gun in the movie because that's all they probably had available. But that's not the case in reality. So they had artillery. Artillery can play a role depending on which part of the shell you're in. But yeah, the plotter field, it's hard, right? Because you have to be exposed above. And Robert will talk about this because we'll have him coming on and talk about this stuff. But you're exposed, so it's not the best. It's a fascinating part of this. It's a discussion, right? The tanks can't really play a role. They're held back because of that. It becomes an artillery infantry kind of slog of a battle. And lots of casualties are taken as a result. Kind of harkening back to the First World War in a lot of ways. But yeah, I mean, they are essentially useless depending on what you're trying to do and how you're going to go about it. But another thing is that the Navy plays a role as artillery, right? That can't be forgotten as well. And it does to some effect work. Again, keep thinking about the landings of Walcheren with Operations Infatuate. It does get used, and it's a good effect for what targets are available. Right, when you flood an entire island, there's not much to shoot at, but there was some bunkers and fortifications, and they did shoot at them. So, yeah. I mean, yeah, you're right, Richard. There's so much here. I mean, you've been telling me about the story of your father, or sorry, your grandfather. My apologies. And like I said, we were talking in an email. There's so much here. Having you on to talk about this would be better instead of doing it piecemeal. You've done so much work. You've done parts of this that I didn't know about in terms of the nitty gritty and who's actually doing the fighting. It's fascinating, and it doesn't get the attention I think it needs. And yeah, you're looking at the German stuff as well and how the defenses are set up. It's fascinating. So that's why I didn't want to just bring you on now and just do a little bit of piecemeal. I didn't want to do that. So if there's any questions, keep them coming. But I'm gonna. Yep. No, you're right. You're right, Keith. Yeah, you're very right. It's depending on the audience and what you're trying to do. That's the thing. I'm trying to reach out and get more people. There's a shameless plug. So hey, become a patron. You can help me out. I already know you are, Keith, and probably most of you here watching, or a YouTube channel member. That helps a lot as well. Just a little bit each month makes a difference. But that's what I'm trying to do, right? I'm trying to do it by reaching different people, doing a little bit of stuff. Today was just been a crazy day for me, so I didn't get to do as much as I wanted. But I want to do shorts, which is a huge part of YouTube now. YouTube is pushing shorts like crazy. Like they're going to monetize it like crazy, push it out hardcore to compete with TikTok. And I think that's a way forward. And that's what I'm going to try and do. I already did one about the 3rd Division getting the name the Water Rats because of the Scheldt and Normandy. But that's just an idea, right? That's what I'm trying to do is change up the medium, right? That's why I do this to begin with, because it's so difficult to reach people. Again, I want to do good history, but it can be done in different ways and reach different people. This is why I do, as I see the shorts, this live streams, and longer videos. I'm trying to cover as many bases as possible. But yeah, you're right, and this is always something we have to keep in mind. To know about the Scheldt and all the things in Normandy and any battle, the First World War, any battle, we know people who are very interested in this stuff are going to read about it sometimes for decades, right? Even as an amateur, you're going to be reading these books forever, digging into it. Sometimes I know amateurs are just going to archives for fun, and then like, oh, those are my people. But it is something I always do keep in mind. But it also, in that way, pushes me to do more. And this is one way to do it. Yeah, and that's the thing too. Yeah, there's 3 different assaults on the causeways, and even the final one isn't it's a tenuous toehold or hanging on by the fingernails at the end of the causeway. and it takes reinforcements who are not Canadians to come and do it to finish it off. Again, as the landings on the west are starting to become even more successful and push to the east on Walcheren Island, is what brings that to an end, basically. Did some stuff because I'm doing tweets for Project 44, and there's one of that coming at the end of the month. So again, it's always an interesting one to discuss, and had Mark Zuehlke on to talk about it. So yeah, it's a fascinating one. Yeah, I mean, it's not the only time I've heard that, right? The medical conditions and the issues people are left with because of the fighting in the Scheldt have lifelong impacts, pneumonia especially. It's just brutal, constant wetness. I mean, yeah, from the flooding, but also from the weather, like I already mentioned. It's what I have in my head. It's just what I was thinking today. So we had municipal elections today. Walking back, just thinking about my head, like just wet and cold kept running through my mind as I was heading home to get ready for this. That was going to be a question, what's the takeaway? It's that it's wet, it's cold, and it sucks, but it needs to be done. Right? It needs to be done. There's a piece. Angus 1 found the size of an elbow with an impact. Sorry, I'm not sure what that is. There's a piece of railway track of Angus 1 found the size of an elbow. Sorry, I don't know what you mean there, Richard. If you could explain, that would be great. Okay, so I'm going to do the big one. 1 second here. From Dave Ederson yet again. Is the Scheldt campaign the greatest single contribution to victory made by the Canadian Army in the Second World War? Dramatic pause and zoom in. Again, Dave gave me this question a long time ago through Patreon when I first had the idea to the AMA. And I'm still thinking about it, and I still don't know if I have an answer. I want to say yeah. I want to say yes. Yeah, I stumble as soon as the word comes out. Yes, I do. I do think it is. I hesitate because there's just so much going on. Other elements, I think the Canadian Army contributes to victory, are maybe not as impactful in the sense of war winning. I think the Scheldt and the clearing of the estuary is war winning in that sense. I mean, crossing the Rhine too is something that I think another one that's not as much attention, but also was massively important. Because again, this comes up. There's always that debate of losses and everything, how the Soviets lost more and fought more and what have you. But geography plays a role in this. Having an enemy right on your doorstep plays into your thinking patterns, plays into the thinking patterns of German leadership, Hitler specifically. So you can't discount that. So I think that's why I'm kind of struggling a little bit there is, yes, that supply is everything. Logistics in modern warfare, again, I don't have to tell some of you watching here who are in or were in modern militaries. It is massive. Logistics cannot be undersold in the importance of it. And this is it, right? That's the Allied way of winning this war is supply in some parts of it, right? You can't crush the enemy under the weight of your economy if you can't get the stuff there, or it takes forever and it's less flexible. We were talking about flexibility earlier. And when you have that, right, when you're tied to a single route of trucks moving across, I mean, they did an amazing job of doing that. It's massive. It's a massive element, and I think you're right here, Sheldrake, with your insight here as well. Dave, sorry. The two events, Compile and Scour, are veritable, which I think is massively important. But again, in my head, I can't square it as the same as the Scheldt, because you don't have veritable until you have the Scheldt. And then the liberation of the Netherlands. Yes, it's majorly impactful. I mean, the Dutch people suffered so much. I mean, that hunger winter, you hear the stories that those people suffered through. It'll break your heart. I think I listened to one on We Have Ways a while back, and it's just heartbreaking, those stories, and getting those people free and fed, literally just even fed as fast as possible was so important. But if you want to take a pure strategic level impact and look at this, it's not quite the same. The Netherlands is kind of out of the way. it's off to the side. They could have just bypassed it, which would have been a horrible humanitarian disaster. And I'm glad they did not. But in the strategic things, you couldn't have left Antwerp, as we've already discussed. That there's not enough. Plain and simple, just not enough. So I think, yeah, it has to be, kind of have to set up, your opinions in terms of, what you have for bias. I mean, we all do, as I always say, but like terms of that, right? Yeah, Netherlands is important. It's massive in terms of that. Sorry, I'm just thinking about this and what that means in terms of things. The liberation of the Netherlands, variables, to me, is huge. But somebody else probably could have done it, or it could have been done differently. Probably the same result either way. But without Antwerp, none of that happens anyway. As we saw with Market Garden, it didn't work, and you needed it. You needed Antwerp, massively important. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right, Keith. No matter what answer I give, it's going to be wrong to somebody. Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think about it in terms of that, right? Like, if you had to think about it, right? Like, what is the actual contribution to victory? I mean, you can look at that differently, but if you're going to look at, say, contribution to victory is making Germany lose, it's the Scheldt. Again, like I already said, liberation of the Netherlands is massively important because of liberation of the Netherlands, period. It's its own objective and good enough, and it's enough to be on its own. But if you're looking at pure, victory terms, the Scheldt is far more important. And First Canadian Army is in a position to do it. I mean, it's difficult. Kriar gets sick at the beginning. One of his overall ailments that had been bugging him ever since before Normandy, I didn't even believe. Probably the stress of everything doesn't help. But they lose their commander. Simmons jumps in. There's a change in headquarters. First Canadian Army. It's like a different energy in a way, different good or bad, depending on who you ask, who was there. I mean, this is talked about all the time, because Kriar and Simmons will forever be bound in story forever. It's massively important, and things like the Causeway and supporting or clearing the Breskins pocket and getting those guns out of the way. It's just so important because the amount that comes into Antwerp is just mind-boggling. Huge amounts of supplies and the importance that it has. It's just crazy. Sorry, interesting that there are very few of the 5-year anniversaries of liberation of the Netherlands. Oh, yeah, okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, focus on the Scheldt. Many few people live there and lived there at the time. Yeah, I think maybe that's it. So I've heard about this in a sense of in a conference a while back. I can't remember. It was one of them, one of the academic conferences. And talking about this, how the Canadians were viewed in the Netherlands. In the South, love them, right? As we've seen, the outpouring of support that when the veterans went back, people went crazy. In the North, it's a much chillier reception because of what we're talking about here today with the Scheldt and the flooding of the islands and all of that and the hardship that it caused. I mean, the Dutch people are clearly quite resilient in keeping the sea back. A good chunk of the country is below sea level. But then that's what they did, because I was doing some reading about this and saying eventually, I think it was in Stacey and Victory campaigns, just saying, oh, they fixed it eventually. Well, I'm sure they would have preferred not to have had to fix it at all. And people died, obviously. Civilians always die from the bombings, from the flooding. I mean, there are, again, some horror stories of people getting trapped in those bunkers when the bombing run was done to break the dike at Walcheren. Again, heartbreaking stuff to read about and hear. So I think that's part of it. But yeah, there's less people there, and it's just not as good of a story in that sense, right? It's not Canadians pushing through fast, liberating people, and getting flowers and having celebrations and flag waving, and it's not that. It doesn't make for a good story. It doesn't make for a good feel-good story. A bunch of infantry battalions pushing across flooded, plotters is just not going to make for a good TV spot. It's just not gonna. And of course, the hangover memory of the First World War is undeniable in Canada during the Second. Depending on, no matter what, I don't care what other people say. Yeah, it's not the same. Sorry, just yeah. Thanks for coming on, James. I'm surprised you made it be here. But yeah, surprised you're out here because it's so late. So thank you, I appreciate that. Very late for you guys. So yeah, so there's more coming. Like I said, so Mike Beckhold tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern, which is 8 p.m. UK time, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong. Turn on notifications, you won't miss it. Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of what I was thinking in terms of, going back to Dave's comment here about the focus of it. I think that's part of it. I haven't done my own digging on that, and I don't know anybody who really lives in that area. The islands especially part, other than, Robert, but he lives in the mainland, I think. I'll have to double check. Yeah. Yeah, and this is another good point here. Every farm and shelter, yeah, it's a strong point, especially because it's on higher up. That's massive. And these buildings are strong, as they were like in Normandy, right? Some of those windmills were like used as bunkers or as shelters, and it's fascinating. Yeah, and we talked about this earlier, Richard. I think you came on a bit later, about how important Antwerp is to the Germans, right? They just, well, there's the issues with the V1s and V2s. They're not the most reliable weapons on the face of the planet. Just kind of point them at Britain and hope for the best. Same sort of thing with Antwerp. It's just shorter to go. It's easier to hit it in that sense. I mean, like I talked about earlier, they didn't hit the docks at all, the docks facilities, any of that, harbor, none of it. They were hitting movie theaters. Like, can't have done that on purpose. Or if they're trying to use it as a terror weapon, it's just not going to work. So, I mean, it's part of it, and it's the vengeance weapons kind of thing, but it's not part of it. And the ultimate, yeah. Well, Antwerp. Yeah, it was about capturing Antwerp, Belgium. Yeah, about capturing Antwerp. Plain simple. We talked about this at the beginning. I think you signed on later. But yeah, that is the objective. I mean, I was talking about at the beginning about how that comes into play, into thinking about this. Right, they're connected. Bulge, Market Garden, Scheld's all connected. Particularly in how you think about these things. Yeah, you had to, same sort of here in a way. It was all, independently funded. Still is in a lot of ways in Ottawa, especially as a national capital. That's the only real example I know. Oh, I see. Okay, sorry, Rich. I'll get back to you in a second here. Yeah, I figured you were. Okay, thanks. It's like, what's happening? It's like a Jeopardy question. It's like, I'll take European ports for 400, Alex. Yeah, that's good though. Yeah, you still have to in a lot of places, right? You have to do this independently, private money. Government will give you land, and that's about it. And sometimes in some countries, that's not even given. It's on private land, private property. Yeah, it's unfortunate, and you can only do so much. I get that. I think I'm the poster child in getting that. You can only do so much when you're just a small amount of resources and one person. It can only do so much. And that's unfortunate because commemoration is important in terms of its own end. I do believe that. Sometimes the cynical academics don't. I believe it's important of in and of itself, but also how we think about these things, how we remember things, right? Memorials have a huge impact. Vimy, again, I'm not going to go on much longer than just this point, but Vimy is important because Vimy is important because of the memorial. These things happen other places too. If it has a place to gravitate to, it makes things easier to remember. And that's one of them. And I think that's a huge part of this. And it's a bit misguided in a lot of ways. I mean, sometimes it's too late, particularly with the world wars in Canada, especially, because that's the context I know. But it's what gets picked, what doesn't get picked, who goes about doing what. And that's how things get remembered. And that's why people think things are important. Or that's why people think things are not important. And this is when people get angry and start yelling at each other about these things, or the internet yelling at each other and getting into fights and things like that. It's unfortunate. And the digital age, I think, is giving us new opportunities to change that a lot and even see physical monuments, right? I was doing something else and I could see the plaque on Google Maps that I was trying to figure out. And that's cool, right? Because I'm not in that area. I get an idea of what's going on, how it sits in the geography, all of that in my own home, which of course makes me just want to go to the places. I guess that's part of the point. But again, I think about commemoration laws. I'm sure a lot of you are aware, and the Scheldt is part of it as well. It doesn't really have much in terms of an impact in commemoration here, even at all. I mean, none of the Second World War really does, to be honest, from the government perspective. They don't talk about too much. Dieppe gets all the attention. Again, did a live stream on defeat and why that is, or in my opinion, why that is. I mean, the banners for Dieppe are still up. It's October. I mean, it's weird because Ottawa does banners usually, particularly in the downtown Centerville. Centertown part of the city. Usually military history related in some way, shape, or form. And the Dieppe ones are still there. It could have been replaced by something else at this point, but they weren't, which is unfortunate, I think, because there's an opportunity for people to learn. And I wish the Scheldt would be one of them and get more attention. But I don't make these decisions. I wish I did, but I don't. So, yeah. Yeah, and Robert will be coming. I don't know if you heard that. Pete, I think you already know that. But Robert will be on, what are we, Monday today? Wednesday. Early, though, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. 2 p.m. Central European Time. Sorry, getting all these time zones mixed up. But yeah, looking forward to that because it's got a great story. I just kind of want to leave a little bit of suspense. There's a really interesting part of that story we're going to be talking about of a particular veteran. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then also getting his thoughts on this stuff as someone who lives there and has always lived there and right in this area. And it's going to be fascinating and to get from him. So again, tomorrow it's Mike Bechtold, 3 p.m. Eastern. Check that out. I don't know if there's anything I missed. If I get everyone's questions, I think so. If there's any more, great conversation. I'm chilling, leaning on my dog. There you go. Isn't that the dream, right? Just talking, listening to some history and chilling with your dog. I'm not with the dog. I don't have a dog. I wish I did, but I don't. There's an AMA part. I don't have a dog, and I wish I do. I wish I did, but I don't. A lot of work. But yeah. I think there's anything else. Well, now that everyone's here, I can do a bit more updating. So I already mentioned Mike, then Robert, and then we've got Philip Razor is going to be coming on the 28th. I'm not sure about the timing. I have to double check that. Talking about the Royal Engineers and the Royal Canadian Engineers and part of the Scheldt. And then our one and only Dave Patterson will be talking about the Royal Military, the Royal Montreal Regiment at the Leopold Canal on the 29th, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So looking forward to that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll do some more posting tomorrow, YouTube specifically, with the whole schedule. Today is just a bit crazy, as life tends to be. It's how these things go. So I'll make sure that is up tomorrow, and I'll put one out on Twitter again, so that's accessible. The patrons already know this. It's been up for a while for them. So that's what beginning of the patron. You get insights and you get impact. I'm starting to think about what to do for the next theme week. So that's going to be patrons are a huge part of what I do. So yeah. Oh, I get some more coming in. Awesome. Is there a Canadian organization who's still looking for the missing connection? No. There's no equivalent to the, I forget the American organization that does that particularly for Vietnam or Southeast Asia, sorry, or former Indochina. No, they don't. It's been so long. I don't think they ever really did that. I mean, there was searching through POW records and things like that to see if somebody would come up. But as far as I know, no, and they're not actively searching for those of the missing either. And this applies kind of just generally speaking. Not really. It was never really something that Commonwealth did. They don't go looking. unless it's brought to their attention. And I'm only talking about remains at this point. We're not going to find any. You're not going to find anybody alive from these conflicts anyway. It's just, I don't think that's going to happen, and it's not needed to happen. And it's kind of coming into Afghanistan. And as far as I know, there are no MIAs in Afghanistan. Anyone who was lost was killed. I mean, but Dave would know better. But I don't think so, as far as I know. I don't think so. Oh, thanks for coming on. And you're new. I haven't seen your name before, so thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. That's really interesting. I've never heard Afghanistan. Served in Afghanistan always pulled parallel from actions there to the Scheldt. That's really interesting. I've never thought about it that way, but I mean, you can pull parallels from the Scheldt to a lot. Afghanistan, especially now I'm thinking about it, I can see it for all kinds of reasons. I assume supply is one of them. Just difficult fighting, difficult terrain, difficult conditions, and kind of pushing forward. It's really, really interesting. But yeah, so thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Well, that's really interesting. Yeah, Clipsphere is, if I said that wrong again, I apologize. I had a video about this. I had to take it down because of YouTube. I don't want to go on about it anymore. I'll probably put it back up when I get some time. I got to change it up. But anyway, so that's a really interesting part. It's not part of the Scheldt, but it's part of the Nijmegen salient area or time period of fighting, I guess you can call it, of a raid on a small island to clear the Germans out. It's a really fascinating one. There's footage of it, which is intense. And yeah, I think, which would make sense. It's all through accidental discovery. That's a particularly low-lying area. It's fascinating. And I don't know, actually more will come because more from the First World War is always coming. Right? I assume Second World War will be no different. There's always more being discovered all the time. And I know things change in the Netherlands frequently. As you, like I said earlier, fighting the ocean, things change. But again, that also can make things be gone forever. Just trying to keep it Scheldt specific. Yeah, no Canadian missing Afghanistan, which I thought so. Yeah, okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, controlling of actions, which is exactly like the Scheldt. We already talked about earlier in terms of, the movement, right? You're pretty much limited to moving along the tops of the dikes, and the Germans strong point those, or, set them up as killing zones, zero them in, and you have to cross, and you got to cross, or through the low-lying plotters, which, again, I don't want to talk too much about because Robert will talk about that. But same sort of thing, right? Control. The one saving grace, right, though, we already talked about earlier, or mentioned briefly earlier, is the alligators, right? The amphibious, armored personnel carriers, basically. It's fascinating to think about it in that way because it's so important, right? With areas of like Afghanistan, lack of road. Same with the Scheldt, there's nowhere to go. But again, the saving grace of having control of some of the water, or most of it, is massive, and that's how they eventually do it, right? Operation Infatuates 1 and 2 are landings on Walcheren that bring it all to an end, basically. I mean, there's some holdouts later, but for the bulk of getting Antwerp open, that's what brings it to an end, and it's a fascinating thing. Yeah, going back to Clipsphere here. Yeah, they don't hold it, right? It's a raid to get them off this. Sorry, I'm just reading Richard's comment here. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's not technically Nijmegen, I guess. Anyway, most Canadian troops are there, so I kind of lump it in. I don't know, I just think I'm fascinated by that one, so I'm going to talk about it. Such a crazy little raid. Combined with tanks too. It's again canoes and tanks. It's crazy. It's not the Scheldt either, but it's a crazy thing that works. It initially doesn't. There's all kinds of iterations of how to do this. It doesn't go well at first. They think it's going to be easy. It's the commandos first or the Poles first. I can't remember off the top of my head. Anyway, someone tries it first. Doesn't work. You get the Canadians involved. And it takes some time, but they get them off. But they don't hold it, right? They just want to stop having this tiny little slither of an island in the middle of the river from the Germans using it as a jump-off point to push to the south side, south bank, and hitting Allied positions. Again, it's fascinating. I should do more with that in the future. It's in the middle of winter and awful conditions and cold and terrible. But yeah, I'd love to do more on that one in the future. It's a really, really cool one that I've done in the past. Just YouTube didn't like the way I did it. Yeah, so I think that's it. Unless somebody's got anything else, we'll give it a second. But yeah, so like I said, kind of give the lineup there. More coming. I'll put a YouTube post up tomorrow morning, more than likely, about the rest of it and anything like that. Yeah, and it'll be up on Twitter as always, and other social media. Just trying to think if I've forgotten anything. Become a patron if you can. It does make a huge difference. It really does help me. You can become a patron for as little as $1 Canadian a month. Or if you do it all at once, it's like less than $12 Canadian because there's a discount. It's like $11 and something cents. It's not much. Any little bit is a massive help. It makes a big difference. This YouTube game is far from easy. And it's far from lucrative at this moment, or possibly ever in that sort of very, very lucrative area. So Patreon and YouTube channel memberships are a huge part of this, and they make this possible because this is a lot of work. It might not seem like it from the outside, but things like this theme week I've been working on since August, September, early September. It's been a while. It's been a long, long time, and a lot of organizing and moving parts and getting stuff together and putting it together with my other work. It's a lot. So any help you can give, it means a lot. And if you can't give financially, sharing is huge. I keep talking that. I got to keep reminding everybody sharing in any of the platforms is massively helpful because that's how algorithms work, right? They see people talking about it, they pick it up, and more people start talking about it. It's just like a snowball going downhill. Share if you can, and I can try to amplify things. Like that helps me amplify. It's not just me putting it out there all the time. I need help with that as well. So if you can do that, that is greatly appreciated. And you're very welcome. Thank you for agreeing to appear, Dave. I'm really looking forward to your presentation. I always want to hear more about the Leopold Canal. Always do. Another theme week this year. That is a good question. What do you want to see? If anybody has any ideas, let me know. Either here, leave a comment down below, especially after we're done. But also social media. I was going to ask my patrons today. I just got caught up because today got busy. Today was a bit crazy. But what next? I don't know. Finishing up 2022 with some more theme weeks. I'd love to do more. I'm just not sure what. I don't know what people want to see. I'm trying to think of things that are like would fit within the calendar, right? November, December. But slim pickings for Canadian only topics. So if we kind of might have to expand a little bit, which I have no problem with, that might work. Because people always want me to do stuff Pacific wise, right? And there's no Canadian stuff. And not to toot my own horn, but there's just hardly any other Hong Kong people out there that are easily to get and do something like this. Other people are writing on the battle, but hardly anybody in Canada. So maybe I can try to get some people. But anyway, if you want to see something, let me know. Leave a comment, especially just so I can keep track of it. It helps me if you keep track of it and the algorithm. Yeah, so I think that's it. So yeah, we can leave it with that. If you have a theme week you love to see, we can do it. Oh yeah, HMs. No, I haven't done a video on Uganda. I don't think I could do a whole week on Uganda. That's a lot. That's a lot of time to cover for one ship. It's the Canadian contribution to the Pacific Fleet. Not much. It's just Uganda. So that's one that's an interesting one to think about. That would probably be a video or like a one-off kind of thing, but that is something I do want to talk about in the future. And there's always Hong Kong as my go-to, obviously. I wonder why. Yeah, I don't know, I'll think about it in terms of what I might be able to put together and some people I know who might want to talk about Hong Kong or generally speaking. I don't know. It's an interesting one, but I'm just not sure if people are that interested in it. Certain types of videos do well and better than others, as these things tend to go. That's the game. But yeah, if people want stuff, let me know and throw some support behind it. Yeah, a video would be cool. Yeah, I just don't have time. Not much time, unfortunately. Time is a precious commodity for me, and I just don't have much of it right now because I'm trying to keep this afloat and do other stuff at the same time to pay my bills. So I can get more Patreon support and things like that. I can do more YouTube, but at the moment, I'm just not in a position to be able to do so. And Canadians in RAF. Okay, I will keep that in mind. Yeah, oh yeah, that's a good idea, actually. Just do Pacific in general. I could probably do that. Yes, there is a VC. Yeah. Escorts, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I'd love to do the Battle of the Atlantic. Do a week on around the Battle of the Atlantic. That would be awesome. I have to get these ideas flowing. Got some time tomorrow to get some ideas written down and get some stuff moving. And if you know anybody or anybody you'd like to see, let me know for any of your theme suggestions. That is also helpful. Borrower, there is a non-controversial one. I'm sure we'll get attention though. It's interesting. Yeah, Borrower is an interesting one. I just don't know too many people working on it, unfortunately. There are people working on it. I just don't know them well. And I don't know if it would... I could think about it. Yeah, so again, like I said, if you have ideas, let me know, particularly down below, or how you like the show. Do you think the Scheldt was Canada's most important victory in the war? I talked about it. What do you think? I could be wrong. I could be sort of right. Let me know. If you think I'm wrong, tell me why. I'd like to hear it. So yeah, other than that, leave a comment down below what you want to see next. Theme weeks are always great, and they just take some planning. So let's get those ideas pumping, and I can get some stuff moving ASAP if you have some good ideas. So again, thanks everyone for watching. I'll see everybody tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern with the great Mike Bechtold talking about air power in the Scheldt. That's going to be a good one because every time Mike is on this channel, it's a good one. It's going to be just another great one of him coming in. Anyway, so thanks everyone for watching. I'll see everybody tomorrow. Bye.